So what I'd like to do is run through these recommendations. There are 5. I want to stop in the middle here, get some questions, and then we'll move on, and then we'll continue on. So the first recommendation I've split in 2. And it is that, some of these to me are logical, but then the schools that we work with in my center, we work with 10 low-income neighborhoods, low college-going schools. About 20% of their students may go on to college. And the sorts of recommendations we've got actually don't happen very much. So part of it is this, and the other part is that. The simple point is that students and families need to know sooner rather than later what they need to take in order to go to college. I can tell you in California in the 10th grade whether or not a student is going to be college ready. But the student doesn't know that, and the family doesn't know that more often than not. And that's, again, one of the problems we face with regard to the counselor-to-student ratio. We would like counselor-to-student ratios to be 250 to 1. Nationally, right now, it's 400 to 500 to 1. In California, it's 800 to 1. So the thought that a 9th grader is going to be able to talk to the counselor is a challenge. That's why this is such an important point. Because personally, I've always found that students will rise to the level of expectations that we have for them. But we have to have recommendations. We have to have expectations. Students lead busy lives. I'm doing a project right now with my doctoral students in terms of how students spend time. And sometimes I think we don't think about it, but students are very busy. They get up at 7 in the morning, they go to bed at midnight, they're running around all day. They think they're leading busy lives. Are they lives the manner in which that prepare them academically is a different question. But does anyone stop and say, hey, do this rather than this? And that's a different point that I want to get to. The second recommendation I also broke into 2. One has to do with assessment, and the other has to do in what we do with assessment. Now, the panel, because it was a very quantitatively focused panel with really highfalutin scholars on it, was really big on assessment. Now, I am too. However, I have a problem with things like No Child Left Untested. And the problem with that is that if you're simply tested and nothing is done, I think of that equivalent to malpractice. I just had a physical, and the doctor told me that I need a bone density scan. I don't really know why, but he told me to get it, so I'll get it. Now imagine if this bone density scan comes back to the doctor. He doesn't tell me anything, or he doesn't look at it. And a year later, I end up with cancer or something like that. I go back to the doctor. He looks at the bone density scan and he goes, well, it's right here. You got a problem. If that doctor said that, I'd have him in court so fast his head would spin. So what are we doing when we test children, but we don't provide some effective treatment to overcome the problem? The simple fact is the more you get behind, the more you get behind. We know, for example, with dropouts, the greatest dropout rate occurs between 8th and 9th grade. Why is that? There are many reasons why students drop out of high school. But the major reason is academics. And the reason is that they get from 8th grade to 9th grade and all of a sudden academics become more important. And it's not very fun if you're so far behind. So you leave. Why can we not speed up learning rather than slow it down? We need clear assessment measures, But we also need a clear, honest conversation with the student and his or her parents and family. So here's recommendation 3. Connections matter. I'll often ask students in high school if, who they talk to about college, and they'll say no one. There's a fellow I know, I mentored, who graduated, or he has graduated, but he went to the University of California at Santa Barbara. When he got accepted, he emailed me, and he told me, I got in, thought you'd like to know. I acted kind of like a parent. Any of you, right? Oh my God, you're going, it's wow. When I saw him, I said, that is incredible, Who else have you told? Nobody. He's a big guy. It wasn't cool to go to college with his friends. His girlfriend he knew was going to be pissed off because she was not going to college. And nobody in the school inquired. Far too often when students get to senior year in the schools where we work, they'll ask somebody like me for a letter of reference. And they're not asking me because I'm Dr. Tierney. They're asking me because they've made no connections with their teachers, counselors. They sort of float through high school. It's not good enough. We need to make sure that students are engaged in a manner that they feel embedded in a college-going culture. Unless students are homeschooled, they are going to have peer groups. We need to be more intentional about those peer groups. Now, let me run through, there are 5 recommendations, but let me run through how we do these things, and then let's stop for a second and have a few questions, and then I'll go to the last 2 recommendations. Here's the recommendation 1. So what we need to do is we need to implement a curriculum that makes sure that they do this. We need to make sure that advanced placement classes are actually advanced placement classes. The kid who went to Stanford took an advanced placement chemistry class. But because the students were not really advanced placement material, they only got through half the book. He then took the advanced placement exam and he got a 3. Now, I don't know about you. I couldn't do that. I couldn't read half a book and get a 3 on it. But of course, that did absolutely nothing for him when he went to Stanford. We know, when I was a kid, and I went to a middle upper class public high school, lots of us took advanced placement classes, but the assumption was that everyone was going to take the advanced placement exam, and you were kind of embarrassed if you didn't get a 4 or 5. Whereas in underperforming schools, there are not enough advanced placement classes. There are not enough students who are in those classes who then take the exams, and then there are not enough students who get 4s and 5s on those exams. So we need to move forward with that. We need to have some type of a trajectory for students. In California, what the phrase is A through G. A through G requirements are what we, as educators, would use as shorthand. Algebra, trigonometry, social studies, these sorts of things. All kids know is, I'm taking A through G. And you go, what does A through G mean? And they go, well, I don't know. I'm taking what I'm told to take. They need to be more active participants, and their families, but especially the kids, in what they're going to take. And they need to be able to say, to rationalize in the 9th grade, this isn't going to set me up for where I want to go. I learned that because I had parents who went to college. I have 2 older brothers who graduated from Notre Dame, which being at USC. It was no small amount of problems. But, you know, I knew I was going to college. And I knew that I needed to think about the types of classes that I took in high school. The students that we work with far too often don't. Recommendation 2, in terms of assessment, what we need to do is we just need to set these things up for students, and we need to have a minimum of tests. Students need to recognize what the meaning of these tests is for and what the treatment is. And the treatment needs to be an individualized plan. Far too often what happens is that, you know, we farm this out to the College Board or ETS or what have you, and sometime in the summer, the student and his or her parents will get a printout that will say something in language, again, that we can understand. But for parents who may never have gone to college, may never have graduated from high school, it has no meaning at all. He's in the 50th percentile. He's in the 5th percentile. We have to write it in language that is comfortable for the individual, and if that's a second language, such as Spanish, then it needs to be that. We need to have some type of mentoring activity for students, and mentoring, I recognize that there are challenges with mentoring. I have a mentoring program. I've had it for the last 8 to 10 years. I also serve on a board for homeless children. I know that with volunteers, we can have mentors come and go. It's tough. But we can also utilize post-secondary institutions, which is a good example here, and work with the colleges of education or other faculty, staff, students. The people in my mentoring program are everybody. My secretary, Diane, who knew that I was in Las Vegas, she's a phenomenal mentor. Why is that? Because she's a mom. She's put 3 kids through high school and college, so when she says you better show up, they show up. That there are many capabilities we've got. What you've got to do is a training program that is not a one-shot deal, but throughout the time. We also need to be intentional with regard to peer groups. You know, there are any number of college-going peer groups, but the challenge with peer groups is not simply that we let them happen, but we're savvy about who we get in these peer groups. I've looked at a mentoring program that took place in Denver, Colorado, and it was over the summer. And it was for high school juniors and seniors, and they were going to, sophomores and juniors and seniors, who were going to go to college. And it was a pretty clever strategy. What the counselor did was she had a bunch of mentors. One of the mentors was the college football coach, and one of the mentors was the high school football coach and high school basketball coach. What did that mean? That meant the football team and the basketball team showed up for this summer program. What did that mean? It meant that it was a cool program. So all of a sudden, sort of a thing that looked on sort of, you know, the nerds go to this in the summer, was like where all these kids go to. And it was remarkably successful. And then they put the photos up all over the school celebrating this. How do you know that you're in a college-going school or a college-going culture in a school? You can see it. How I got into this mentoring program was, how I started it was that I went to a high school graduation about 10 years ago, and it was one of the schools that we went to. And at the graduation, the principal said, let's give a hand to the students who are going to college this year. And there were like 15 kids who stood up. You know, hooray. And what I wanted him to say is, this year we've got 15 students, and next year we'll have 30. That wasn't it. Because far too often in the schools, at least in Los Angeles, long-range planning is trying to make it to Friday. So what we've got to do is we've got to figure out strategies to make these things happen so that students feel a sense of camaraderie. There's the young man that I worked with this year in a high school the day he got accepted to Berkeley, he put Berkeley Bound, a picture of Berkeley, on his Facebook page. He has 500 friends. How can a high school student have 500 friends? It's remarkable to me. But he has 500 friends. That's what we want. And he said, my dream school. How can somebody, how does he know? He'd never even visited Berkeley, but it was his dream school. So he's going to Berkeley. But not only does that sort of message say something, and he's a cool kid who plays basketball, not only does that send a message about celebrating him, but it says to other kids who are friends on Facebook, utilizing social media, hey, this is a cool thing to do. We need to try to help students think through what they want to do. Far too often, I think people say that students don't want to talk much about the future or their careers or what have you. And if you're parents of teenagers, I'm sure that you all know that, through the teenage years, students kind of become multi or single syllabic, right? How are you? Good. Right? How was school today? Okay. Right? But what I found is that if you're not in that relationship, and then when they get to college, they learn how to speak again. Can I have some money? That actually students are quite reflective on their lives, but they don't have anybody to reflect to. That's again what I think mentoring has the potential of doing. Because I'm going to speak in a minute about the importance of helping kids apply to college. But when you're helping kids apply to college, you're also working with them on multiple levels. And when you're engaging students in a way, you're a unique person. You're not a parent who can say, be home by 10 o'clock. And you're not a peer who's just going to laugh. You want to go to college? So let me stop for a minute, and let's have 2 or 3 questions, and then I'll go on to the other 2 recommendations. And don't have any problems about disagreeing with me. I've got graduate students, they disagree with me all the time. I think the question is, what are the best practices in terms of helping students be motivated to be engaged in a plan of study? And I think what we need to recognize with a plan of study plans of study is that it's not a one-shot deal. It's not giving a student something in 9th grade and saying, here it is, now just hoe the line and continue forward. What they need to recognize is the full panoply of possibilities. But it's really something that I need, with my own students in the PhD program, I do the same thing. It's something that is a continuous conversation. Are these courses difficult enough for you, or are they too difficult for you? If they're one or the other, what are we going to do? If they're too difficult, how are we going to get you up to speed? If they're too easy, what can we do to make the classes harder? And they need to be consciously involved in this, so it's not something that is a summative conversation, it's a formative conversation.
To be doing to get their children ready for college? Thank you. Instead of asking what help or assistance they need, or asking what their perceptions of college are. And then we often make presumptions because we don't see parents attending events or coming to parent-teacher conferences that they are uninterested or unengaged, when the truth is that they have things going on in their lives that quite frankly take priority. We have great systems in place with ILPs and parent portals and things for methods of communication, but we stop thinking outside. We narrow our engagement by not going to where parents are. If you know that your parents are congregating together at a church on Sunday, that's a great opportunity to have that parent-teacher conference with them. I know it puts a little more burden of responsibility on our teachers who are already overburdened, but if you know that you have parents gathering, if you know that this is a priority, because I just attended kindergarten graduation, there wasn't room. There was standing room only. There was cheering, there was celebration, and this was just kindergarten to 1st grade. As our children age, we stop that celebratory aspect of things.
Like this?
This stops.
Right.
And it becomes more of yeah, so you just finished 8th grade, that's great, now you're going on.
Right.
We do that as a culture in education. How do we better engage our families in this process if we're not creating the language of this process together?
I think there are a couple things that we need to think about here. You know, some years ago I was working with a student who was in my office, and he was applying for financial aid, and which is no easy process if you filled out FAFSA forms. And we needed his father's Social Security number. So he called his father, and this was a Latino family, and I could, you know, he was saying to his father, you know, Papi, I need your Social Security number. And I could hear the father say, why do you need my Social Security number? And the kid saying, I don't know, but he says I have to have it. You know, and the father says, well, I don't want to give it. Who is this guy? You know, and he said, he's a professor. You have to give it. Right, and that's the sort of thing, like totally disempowered. So I had to go talk to the father, and then it was understandable. One of the things I think is, there are two things, and we know that different kinds of parents have different needs. So although it's changing, it's still the case, at least in Los Angeles, that with Latino fathers, they are very concerned about sending their daughters off to college. They've never visited these campuses. That's different than parents, homeless parents, for example. I think that there are two issues, but to me, they always come back to the student. One is that, and I say to the students, your parents may not have gone to college, but you need them. And you're going to find out that you need them if you go away to college. So the first thing you need to do is, you know, a lot of students may never have set foot on a campus, and their parents may never have set foot. It's alien territory. So one is, I've got students coming to campus as much as possible, but the other thing is to tell them, at some point, take your mom and dad and your younger brother or sister and go to a campus. Just buy a Coke. Don't do anything academic. Just walk around. Because at least people can then visualize where their son or daughter is going to be. There's a student right now, and she's at UCLA, and she lived in another part of Los Angeles. It's Los Angeles. You know, to go to UCLA, well, the traffic, you know, Los Angeles, but it's not that big a deal. But it's across town. And this mother and her daughter had never been to UCLA. It was like, it would be like saying, I'm going to go to Louisville. It's like, whoa, that is far away. So we needed to create experiences for parents to do that. And frankly, the freshman orientations, those sorts of things where parents are invited to go and they're good experiences for families, oftentimes the parents of the kids that we work with feel out of place. So we've got to figure out how we can do that in an individual time. And if it's just students showing up, it's students showing up with their parents and having a Coke at the cafeteria, and somebody going, this is okay. I feel safe around here. I feel safe for my daughter. The other is to try to help students think, what is it that they want their parents to do for them? Because there are some parents of low-income youth who will be actively engaged in their academic lives. No, don't major in psychology, major in this. But there are others who will engage them in socio-emotional ways or religious ways. You know, that they are active members of their church. And that's how parents can play a referent point. I don't think that there is one answer, but you know, the real message to go forward is to say to students, you need your parents. So we need to figure out how we're going to work with them to ensure that they're on the team. We also have to recognize that not 100% of the parents are going to be on the team, right? But that's true all the time. There's never 100%.